Soon, a destructive infection strikes humankind and rapidly causes the breakdown of development. The land masses are only disarray, brutality, and savagery, however the infection doesn't spread seaward. In Germany, the main place of refuge is Helgoland, an island fixed off from the rest of the world. 513 individuals live there, and to stay aware of assets, at whatever point another person is conceived an inhabitant should be forfeited. The island is governed by ruthless regulations, and any individual who splits them winds up at the lower part of a list of competitors. A fake vote concludes who needs to pass on who actually has an opportunity to show what them can do. 15 years have passed since the underlying infection episode. In Helgoland, Amelie is bringing forth her child while correspondent Lola records the entire cycle. The child is conceived well and solid and gets a gift from her granddad, who then, at that point, passes on the center to move toward the bluff. It turns out he elected to self-erase so his granddaughter could have his spot on the island. The man expresses farewell to the family prior to meeting his demise, uninformed that back in the center, Specialist Merrick finds it isn't finished, Amelie is having twins, and soon a subsequent child is conceived. They never thought this since they need medical clinic hardware. Subsequently, the gathering talks about what to do in regards to the subsequent child. Some of them figure they shouldn't kill anybody and permit the island to contact 514 individuals, yet others call attention to that in the event that they make an exemption now, everybody will request one later on. In the end, Beatrice declares they'll allow individuals to decide regarding this situation. The report covers the story and helps individuals to remember the competitor list. On 511th spot is Christian, who monstrosities when he sees his name on the screen. That's what he says on the off chance that he gets picked he won't hop, yet his companion Hendrik advises him that the last individual who attempted that was moved forcibly in an enclosure. The 512th spot is Elise, an old woman who is viewed as a waste since she can't contribute a lot of in her advanced age. The last spot is Etienne, who is viewed as a lawbreaker in spite of the fact that he swears he's simply a diligent employee. The following day, Merrick and his child Linus go to the lab to keep dealing with an immunization. Anyway, Merrick is baffled since they're inadequate with regards to assets and new examples, so he figures they will not be gaining any headway like this. Subsequently, Judith gets Merrick so they can convey medication around. First they visit Etienne, whose spouse Lisa faults Judith for his keep going put on the board. Judith advises her that Etienne took medication, yet Lisa brings up he needed to do that in light of the fact that the specialists wouldn't give it to him. He had simply needed to help his debilitated spouse, yet he was rebuffed with no nourishment for a considerable length of time. The contention is interfered with when a neighbor stops by to get Lisa's pendulum's clock, causing Merrick to understand that 2 or 3 has been purchasing votes. Lisa beseeches him to converse with Beatrice and Merrick vows to give his very best. In the meantime, Amelie unexpectedly awakens from her rest when she hears a clamor and finds Elise in the room with a child in her arms. Amelia promptly takes the kid back and blames Elise for needing to kill the child to save herself, however Elise swears she wouldn't hurt a kid and just tracked down the child on the steps so she attempted to help. Back to Merrick, he visits Legend to get her some medication mysterious. Anyway, Judith has been watching him and later educates Beatrice at the general store. Amazingly, Beatrice requests that she maintain the mystery for the present since they need Merrick and his insight, however she trusts Judith might supplant him one day. At that point, a youngster coincidentally breaks a container of pickles, and Hendrik advises Christian this is the ideal second to great search before the group. Christian methodologies the kid and gives him an apple while saying it wasn't his issue, then, at that point, another lady likewise gives the youngster a little gift. Beatrice then reports the two of them get a point for sharing their food. Close by, Hendrik finds Etienne and Lisa and specifies he'll be working at the capacity today, so he offers to get some nourishment for them unlawfully. Lisa calls him appalling and attempts to drive him away, yet Henrik promptly stops her and takes steps to be less decent sometime later. A while later, Henrik drops the tomato he had been eaten and leaves, so Etienne gets the tomato and eats it to Lisa's disdain. The entire experience is seen by Beatrice, who follows Henrik out and reprimands him for his way of behaving, saying she can't safeguard him until the end of time. It turns out Henrik is her child, and he will not act except if Beatrice gets him a strategic, influential place. Later, Merrick gets back to the lab and in the wake of getting ready, he uncovers a locked entryway at the back where he's keeping Peter, a debilitated patient from the central area who is being utilized as a guinea pig. That's what the arrangement says, assuming the trial and error works out positively, he can live on the island whenever he's restored. While Merrick gives him an infusion, Peter specifies he's been feeling much improved, so he figures the medication might work. In the meantime, Lisa meets with Hendrik and Confidential to acknowledge his food offer, which she should pay with her body. Anyway, the second is interfered with when an alarm comes in saying mainlanders are attempting to arrive at the island. Since Hendrik couldn't get done, he gives Lisa simply a can and afterward races to meet with different gatekeepers at the shore. They can see a pontoon coming, so they advise them to return or they'll start shooting. The gathering doesn't comply and a watchman shoots, killing a mainlander. The remainder of the gathering moves frightened and attempts to go off, yet Hendrik continues to show no mercy to them all, for which he gets reproved by crew pioneer Mia. A couple of hours after the fact, everybody accumulates to do the democratic. First the focuses are changed and presently Christian isn't the last three any longer. The residents vote to keep the subsequent child, and among the three competitors, Etienne gets the most votes to be killed. At that point Lisa says she votes in favor of Hendrik on the grounds that he's a victimizer, and soon more ladies rise up to back up her story. Hendrik calls attention to it was all consensual, however the ladies say his MO is to trade nourishment for joy and he was simply exploiting frantic individuals. Local people promptly start supporting the ladies, so Beatrice must choose the option to concede Hendrik committed intimidation and robbery, so she allows the gathering to cast a ballot once more. Everyone votes to kill Hendrik, but Beatrice says a mother can't kill her own child and Hendrik will be thrown out, all things being equal. Every one of local people fight, yet they're overlooked and Hendrik is brought to prison. Lola records the entire thing, however when she alters the video, she removes individuals' fights. Meanwhile Merrick returns to the lab and finds Peter is struggling, so he gives him another infusion as he guarantees it'll help. Minutes after the fact Peter is dead and Merrick burns the body. The following morning, Linus illuminates Merrick that he's joining Mia's undertaking gathering to the central area to get refreshes on the world. Merrick attempts to preclude him from getting it done, yet Linus overlooks his interests. In a little while, local people go to express farewell to the Endeavor bunch, who are likewise taking Hendrik with them. En route to the boat, Hendrik headbutts Etienne and must be hauled away. During the excursion, the gathering shares tales about the central area, envisioning it as a zombie end times. In the long run they arrive at a harbor and Hendrik is pushed out of the boat. Frantic, he attempts to give a discourse to cause them to feel frustrated about him, however Heinz fires, thumping him since certain ladies and his family were his casualties. Hendrik offers payoffs on the off chance that they take him back, so Heinz takes shots at the ground to make him take off. Then Mia needs to prevent Heinz from shooting once more. Back on the island, Beatrice is called to the water supply building since there are issues with the filtration, which is going to arrive at all-out shut-off. As the workers look for the issue, a lady sees as a radio and shows it to Beatrice, who is shocked on the grounds that radios are unlawful on the island. Minutes after the fact, boss architect Ulike reports he's tackled the issue and Beatrice salutes him for his diligent effort, however when he requests to carry his better half to the island since she is untainted, Beatrice declines. Back to the Endeavor bunch, they sail through a waterway to investigate the city and track down it in a horrendous state. The officers pass on to look for tests, however Linus is told to remain in the boat. At an extension, Mia and the fighters meet with the Lord, whom they've been carrying on with work for some time. They're unexpectedly hindered by a frantic man requesting to be taken to the island, however Duke's king kill him. Mia offers Duke new food and as a trade-off, Baron gives them medication and 2 enormous boxes. In the meantime Linus becomes weary of delaying and look through the area, just to find a lot of survivors who let him know the infection is no more. Linus doesn't really accept them and keeps his firearm up, so the survivors ridicule him and leave. Out of nowhere Linus is drawn nearer by Mojik, who provides Linus with a jug of medication and says there's significantly to a greater degree toward an unwanted boat lab he found. Linus consents to follow him and they enter the boat, where Linus shows him a crate loaded with medication. He says there's a greater amount of it and legitimate gear in the genuine lab and requests refuge for himself as well as his companions consequently. Linus attempts to make sense that he can't give them that, just to out of nowhere wind up encompassed by survivors. Terrified, he takes off. Meanwhile, Mia's gathering is returning to the boat, and unexpectedly a survivor hops on Heinz to eliminate his cover. The troopers promptly shoot the fellow and get on the boat, where they find Linus is gone. Anyway, they guarantee they can't sit around and leave without him. At that point Linus emerges from the boat and sees the gathering leaving, so he begins pursuing them. A nearby attempts to stop him, yet Linus rapidly wrecks him and continues to run. Then he hops on a higher surface and bounces toward the waterway, arrival on the boat in the nick of time. Shockingly, Mojik lands right behind him, and Mia promptly shoots him. Then the fighters notice Linus has a tear in his suit, so they shoot him with a sedative to make it lights out time for him. Minutes after the fact at the island, Linus awakens and conceals the medication bottle in his clenched hand while he's taken to the cells and given a decent wash. At the point when Merrick at last comes to see him, Linus gives him the medication and informs him regarding the lab. Then, at that point, Merrick gives his child an infusion for good measure. Before long Heinz is likewise brought to a cell and he won't quit hacking, so Merrick really looks at his body and tracks down a rash on his skin. A while later Merrick tests the medication Linus brought and affirms it's genuine. He requests that Beatrice send one more group to the central area, however Beatrice denies in light of the fact that having 2 individuals in isolation experiences previously been sufficient difficulty. Prior to leaving, she advises Merrick to give Hines counterfeit medication and Merrick is crushed to do as such. On the central area, Lord's men recover Mojik's body from the water and track down medication in his pocket, so Baron sends them to track down Mojik's companions. Close by, Hendrik at long last comes to the city and perceives how a survivor gives Wilma a watch in return for being sanitized. Hendrik attempts to do the equivalent yet just has a keychain to offer, so Wilma compromises him into remaining back. To demonstrate he doesn't have a rash, Hendrik takes off his garments and uses the opportunity to entice her. Wilma gets bulldozed and hits the dance floor with Hendrik while paying attention to her boombox. Anyway, when Hendrik requests a taste of her water bottle, Wilma slaps him for it. Then, at that point, she gives him new garments and takes him around the area to show him her cleaning routine in the theater where she resides, referencing that her keep-going associate coincidentally gotten on flares due to the scouring liquor. She continues to make reference to Baron, however at whatever point Hendrik takes a stab at getting some information about him, she quiets him down. Some other time when Wilma mines her reserve of fortunes, Hendrik shocks her from behind and pounds her to death. In the meantime, Beatrice converses with Lisa and praises how daring she was, the point at which she faced Hendrik, bringing about maneuvering Lisa toward turning into her eyes and ears around the island with the commitment of a decent life for herself as well as her significant other. The following time Beatrice shows up on television, Lisa shows endorsement of Hendrik's discipline having been a special case. At the lab, Merrick persuades Judith to assist him with the exploration since he works gradually without Linus. At the point when they check the crates Duke sent, Judith is nauseated to find 2 individuals in them, however Merrick isn't shocked since it's essential for the arrangement with Baron. The 2 individuals are maintained as guinea pigs in mystery cells and given infusions to test Marek's antibody preliminaries. Sadly, Hines kicks the bucket before they can track down a fix to help him. In the other cell, Linus conceals the reality he has a rash as well. During a town meeting, Beatrice shares the report about Hines and faults Mia for it, calling her a reckless pioneer. Mia fights. However, Beatrice disregards her and needs to cast a ballot to cause Mia to lose 100 focuses. Abruptly, Lola's little girl Fiona begins hacking and her companions duplicate her, making everybody take off. Beatrice stays and declares Mia is losing her focuses, so her name goes down on the list of competitors. Subsequently, the gathering votes for considering guardians liable for their youngsters' activities. The following morning, Fiona hurls, and Lola acknowledges she might be pregnant. She takes her to see Legend, who has a testing machine that affirms the pregnancy. Lola maintains that Fiona should allow Legend to eliminate the embryo since it's an unlawful pregnancy, yet Fiona rejects and runs off. Then Legend illuminates Lola there's a tea she can use to compel the deficiency of the child. At the point when she gets back, Lola imagines she simply needs to comfort Fiona and gives her the tea. After Lola leaves the room, Fiona's beau Tom emerges from stowing away and guarantees he won't join the crew to deal with his new family, all things considered. The following day at the lab, the central area patients are deteriorating. Merrick says they need to work quicker on a fix since they don't have time, however when Judith asks what it implies, he won't make sense of. Then Judith gives one more infusion to her patient sibling offered her to Baron in return for food. In the meantime, Merrick keeps an eye on Linus, who has been feeling peculiar temperature changes and having odd dreams. He at long last uncovers his rash, just for Merrick to admit he's known since Linus returned, making sense of why he's in such a rush. Linus persuades Merrick to involve him as a guinea pig too in light of the fact that he needs to valuable before color. On the central area, Duke goes up against Mojik's pack, showing them the body and letting them know the islanders got it done. Lord guarantees better day-to-day environments and nourishment for the entire gathering in the event that they let him know where the boat is, yet Flash is dubious of Duke and lets him know Mojik lied. In the wake of sending different children to have some food, Duke converses with Flash in private and persuades him they can make an arrangement. Flash realizes Lord needs to arrive at the island, so he requests security and to be taken to the island as well. Duke concurs and gives him his statement. Back in the lab, Merrick gives Linus the infusion prior to leaving. On out, he finds Mia in prison planning weapons, which is her discipline. Merrick chooses to offer her an arrangement. He'll let her out assuming that she sneaks to the central area to track down the boat with medication that Linus referenced. Anyway, Mia believes that no more difficulty and tells him she should converse with Beatrice first. In the meantime, Hendrik starts meandering with Wilma's truck, and when he sees a young lady, he gives her a few batteries in return for data. At that point, 3 men show up behind him and take him out with a taser. At the point when Hendrik awakens, he's hanging topsy-turvy and his garments are absent. It turns out the lady is one of the guys that caught Hendrik and presently they need to eat him, however when Hendrik says he works for Baron, they falter. They don't actually trust him, yet they can't face the challenge either, so they take Hendrik to see Lord. Hendrik presents himself as Beatrice's child and imagines he was seized during the crew's last visit, causing it to appear as though he was unintentionally abandoned and that Beatrice will compensate fairly for him. He additionally says that Wilma passed on from the infection and that her last wish was for him to carry every one of her things to Baron. Satisfied by this data, Duke pays the pack with a few medication and keeps Hendrik. Later, in the wake of minding his hair meat production line, Duke keeps an eye on a tied-up Hendrik to illuminate him. His tests affirm he isn't contaminated. Anyway, he's likewise brought data. He realizes Beatrice threw Hendrik out and that Wilma was killed. Frantic, Hendrik offers data about the island's safeguard ring and its shortcoming, so Duke chooses to allow him to live. The following day, the island opens interviews on the central area to take another individual since there's an open spot after Heinz's passing. Yulike's significant other Kaiso joins in, and after a test affirms she isn't contaminated, she gets talked with through a screen. Since she says she has drug preparing, Merrick poses her a few inquiries to really take a look at her insight. Kaiso answers everything accurately and passes to the last round. Meanwhile, Etienne finds another line of work at the island's last windmill because of Lisa's new kinship with Beatrice. While dealing with the instruments, he tracks down a container of liquor. Etienne gives the container to his supervisor Joachim, who takes it and sends Etienne home. Later in the early evening, Beatrice assembles local people and presents the two best contender for another resident. One is Kaiso and the other is a specialist named Daniela, who offers a great discourse about her involvement with the post-infection world. The two ladies answer Marek's inquiries well indeed, however when now is the ideal time to cast a ballot, Daniela effectively wins since they view a specialist as more valuable. Ulike is crushed to hear this and hollers about the commitments the gathering made prior to reporting he'll return to the central area to accompany his significant other. Anyway, Beatrice prohibits it since he's the one in particular that knows how to deal with the water supply framework. Before long, Daniela shows up at the island, and local people don't see that two gangsters are concealed in the boat. That evening, Daniela sees Ulike keeping an eye on her and berates him. In the interim, Joachim attempts to conceal the container, however he can feel the liquor calling for himself and winds up becoming inebriated. In the first part of the day, Ulike begins climbing the windmill to make some harm its motor. Joachim sees him on the surveillance cameras, however when he rises up to pursue him, he implodes on account of his headache. In the end, he figures out how to stand up once more and attempts to climb the windmill as well, just to slip and break his leg, leaving him holding tight a stage. Before long, a rescue vehicle gets him and takes him to Merrick and Judith. They must choose the option to remove the leg, and when Daniela shows up, she's so stunned by the view that she takes off. After the activity is finished, Merrick faces Daniela, who concedes she isn't a specialist and just remembered the book Merrick uses to respond to his inquiries. She guarantees she's there to help Merrick and Linus, saying Beatrice's days are numbered. At that point, Judith goes into the room since she heard everything. She additionally uncovers she realizes Linus is contaminated and that Merrick has been utilizing more assets with him than expected, which is contrary to the guidelines. Daniela unexpectedly goes after her and fires, whipping her, getting a fire quencher to kill her with a hit to the head. She requests that Merrick maintain the mystery since she'll carry an adequate number of assets for Merrick to find the fix and save his child at last. A while later, they toss Judith's body into the sea. The following day, Beatrice attempts to maneuver Fiona toward turning into her girl, however Fiona reprimands her. Then, at that point, Beatrice uncovers Tom is in prison for not having any desire to join the crew and conveys a ton of intimidations toward him and Fiona's companions, yet Fiona actually doesn't give up. She thinks the purported pleasant local area Beatrice has fabricated is a trick and couldn't care less in the event that she's shipped off the lower part of the competitor list. At night, Tom's folks visit him in prison and notice he's harmed, yet Tom swears he fell. At that point, Ulike is gotten too, and he additionally has wounds, demonstrating that the gatekeepers are excessively fierce to their detainees. At the lab, Linus breakdowns and Merrick spends bunches of assets treating him until Linus stirs once more. The following morning, Fiona is headed to work when she abruptly drops in the street. She awakens in her bed and Merrick minds her, affirming she had a premature delivery. Lola requests that Merrick keep the mystery from Beatrice, referencing patient secrecy. In the meantime, Beatrice is stressed over Judith and keeps an eye on Joachim to get some information about the activity, yet he says he was out and remembers nothing. In the wake of making sense of Etienne fix the windmill, Beatrice checks out the facility and finds a tooth stuck on the wall. She quickly goes to see Merrick and blames him for killing Judith, however Merrick simply giggles since he realizes Beatrice needs him and can't throw him out. Then, at that point, Beatrice says she'll make it seem to be Ulike killed Judith, leaving Merrick feeling regretful. During another town meeting, Beatrice lets everybody know that Ulike killed Judith, and Lisa assists her with some phony proof. Everybody votes to rebuff Ulike aside from Fiona's gathering, Merrick, and Tom's folks. After the gathering, Joachim visits Lisa and Etienne, who has turned into the individual responsible for the windmill since Joachim can't work any longer. Joachim brings up many individuals realize he used to be a fiend and that Lisa approaches Beatrice's provisions, suggesting she set him up so her significant other could get an advancement. The couple denies it and Joachim separates, so Lisa offers him to function as her homegrown laborer so he can in any case feel valuable. In a little while, local people accumulate at the ocean side to see how Ulike is restricted with some weighty metal and passed on close to the water for the waves to kill him gradually. Feeling exceptionally regretful, Merrick chooses to go to the lab and confess to Linus every one of his insider facts. The day the end times assumed control over the world, Merrick was getting back to his home on the island with a more youthful Linus while his better half Tessa was currently at the emergency clinic taking examples from contaminated dead individuals. Before he was permitted to pass, he needed to demonstrate he lived there and that he wasn't contaminated. A short time later Merrick sneaked inside a supermarket to get a few supplies and met Beatrice, who was a rack filler in those days, and let him leave with some food without paying. At the point when Merrick came to the island, he conversed with Nurture Legend and they cooperated to begin a testing station. In the meantime Beatrice gave different representatives a major discourse and they collaborated to assume command over the store. The workers painted the windows and when clients came, they didn't allow them to pass. Rather they declared another framework in which the clients gave them the rundowns and the workers would draw out their orders. Certain individuals blew up on the grounds that they were simply permitted to take low amounts to abstain from storing, so Beatrice imagined the representatives were outfitted to drive them to collaborate. At night when the manager left the store, the furious clients kidnapped him. Beatrice promptly locked the entryway and requested that the workers vote on what to do. They chose not to open the entryways, and the manager wound up dead. Then, at that point, Beatrice opened the entryways so her group could take steps to shoot the clients, who dropped the weapons and took off in dread. The group accumulated the weapons and Beatrice sent them after the clients while little Hendrik watched from inside the store. The following day, Beatrice reached the island's police boss and let him know she had coordinated her own volunteer army by maneuvering youngsters towards safeguarding their home. She figured they ought to make an arrangement to get the island and save it from the disaster that was assuming control over the world. At first the cop rejected, however Beatrice adjusted his perspective when she showed him the clients she had restricted in the storage compartment of her vehicle. Before long Beatrice assumed command over the island's drugstore by keeping it in her store as well, and Lola began shooting her to show how much good she was accomplishing for the local area. At the point when Merrick found this, he took steps to tell the specialists since somebody without legitimate information ought not be accountable for medication, however Beatrice let him know she was the specialists. To quiet him down, Beatrice let Merrick take the medication he really wanted for his tests. In a little while the city chairman assembled all the island residents and blamed Beatrice and her gathering for vigilantism. Beatrice quickly started a manipulative discourse, let everybody know how the store's supervisor wound up dead and how she had an underground market to keep the store loaded in light of the fact that the city chairman was falling flat at his specific employment. She even drew out the caught client as evidence. Merrick attempted to dissent, yet the police boss supported up Beatrice's story and soon local people were pummeling the client to show their help of Beatrice's approaches. Merrick hurried to the person to attempt to help him, yet he was pulled back and the police took the man to the sea. With another discourse, Beatrice persuaded everybody to allow the person to suffocate. At night Merrick called Tessa, who was gaining some headway with the comprehension of the infection. At that point a lot of furious individuals broke into the emergency clinic and began killing every one of the specialists. At the point when they encompassed Tessa, she took steps to break a test tube with the infection, however they didn't trust her and fired pounding her while obliterating her lab. Merrick needed to watch on the screen how Tessa was killed without leniency. In the meantime Beatrice went to converse with Legend about keeping the populace sensible for provisions. At that point she saw 513 on a schedule promotion and told Legend 513 was the ideal number to hold the DNA on the island back from being something very similar, guaranteeing it was an estimation made by the neighborhood researcher. Legend was appalled on the grounds that would mean disposing of around 50% of the island residents, so Beatrice took steps to start her off in the event that she didn't collaborate. In any case, assuming that Legend helped her, Beatrice would furtively give her all the medication she really wanted for her diabetes. Legend had no real option except to concur. In a little while, the tides dropped a few contaminated bodies on the island, which were tossed out of the central area. Legend and Beatrice took an example of their blood and afterward visited a resident to infuse him with the contaminated blood while guaranteeing it was insurance against the infection. Later the person felt exceptionally wiped out and ran out of the house, just to fall down and die before a lot of individuals who accepted this as more evidence of Beatrice's accounts. Subsequently Merrick began to test everybody on the island while Lola recorded all that as a feature of Beatrice's promulgation crusade. Merrick and Legend tried all the blood and everybody confessed all out, but Beatrice stamped a portion of the island as contaminated. At first Merrick would not be important for it, however Beatrice helped him to remember Tessa and brought up they needed to prevent something very similar from occurring on the island. Merrick gave in when Beatrice vowed to give him the assets to foster an immunization, coercing him into contemplating his child. A while later Merrick visited each phony contaminated individual with the watchman and drove them away from the island on the ship until just 513 individuals were left. Certain individuals attempted to dissent just to have chance simultaneously. Watching with repulsiveness, Merrick committed to find the immunization and deal with Beatrice after the pandemic was finished. In the present, Linus lets Merrick know that what he did was self-centered, however he actually adores him. Then Linus bites the dust and Merrick is crushed to such an extent that he at long last snaps. He takes the security tape with his admission aiming to show the entire island reality, and when Legend comes to take it from him, Fiona snatches it first since she supports the thought. At that point Daniela appears with a firearm and powers Fiona to give her the tape, then, at that point, she shoots it to obliterate the proof and declares the Baron is coming, so things are going to change. On the central area, Flash tells Duke the area of the boat with the lab and they carry it out to begin with their arrangement. In the interim on the island, the gangsters kill one of the councilmen.